Rain presses at the window like steady hands, and my apartment smells faintly of coffee that went cold hours ago. The voice memo sits on my screen with his name glowing. I listen once all the way through because I want to be certain I am not filling in blanks with hurt. Daniel is walking somewhere loud, traffic and laughter in the background, and he is talking to his sister like I cannot hear him. He says I have become small. He says he will figure out the timing so it looks kind. He says respect faded. My thumb shakes and then steadies. I save the file. I do not cry. The ring makes a soft sound when I set it on the coffee table. It looks like it belongs to a different life. The storm outside throws quick light across the room, and the diamond catches it like a signal that never reaches shore. I study my reflection in the glass, hair pulled back, hoodie zipped to my chin, knuckles white around my phone. There is a version of me that would plead. There is also the one my grandmother raised who keeps records, breathes in through the nose, and moves with purpose when the room spins. I open my laptop and the screen warms my face. A blank document waits and I begin to outline what the next 24 hours will look like. At 9 in the morning, I will send a factual note to his manager and to HR. No adjectives. Dates, times, and the parts that concern workplace conduct and reputation. At noon, I will send a brief to the client contact who funds community programs and cares about values on paper and in practice. At 5, I will post a calm update that says I am choosing peace and stepping back. I will not name him. I will not invite a fight on the internet. I do not need a crowd to believe me in order to be free. Before any of that, I will leave. I slide important documents into a folder, the passport, the lease copy, the receipts I saved after learning to save them, and 2 photos that still feel like mine. My suitcase stands open at the edge of the bed, and I pack, without rushing. Jeans and a sweater. Running shoes that still carry dust from a happier weekend. The small necklace my mother gave me the day I started my first job. I take one last look at the entry table where we kept the bowl for keys. He always said family does not need permission. I remember the day his mother let herself in because she wanted to stock our fridge, and how I smiled and thanked her while wondering why my hands were shaking. The plan grows clearer as I work. I will use my own card to book an extended stay across town. I will call the ride downstairs, not the service he prefers that sends receipts to our shared inbox. I will leave the apartment clean. I will leave the ring in plain sight. I will leave no note because there is nothing to debate. The conversation already happened without me, and it left a record, and I will answer it with a record of my own. I write the first email in calm language. I say I am stepping away for safety and health. I say there have been patterns that do not align with company standards. I attach a single image I once took in a bathroom mirror when a hand-shaped bruise looked back at me. I remember the apology that followed, and the promise that everything would be different, and I feel my stomach turn. I close my eyes and count to 5 like my therapist taught me during a session I never mentioned to him. When I open my eyes, the cursor is still waiting, and I finish the paragraph and save the draft. The ride arrives and I carry my suitcase to the door. I take the ring from the table and set it on his hardcover book, because paper will not scratch the wood. For a second I imagine him waking and calling my name, and I let the picture fade. I turn off the lights, listen to the rain, and step into the hallway with a steadiness I have not felt in months. The elevator doors close and I watch my reflection in the brushed metal. I look like someone who made a decision and kept it. At the hotel desk, the clerk asks for a name and a card, and I hear my own voice come out level and sure. In the room, I put my bag on the chair and sit on the bed with my laptop on my knees. I schedule the first email for 9. I schedule the second for noon. I draft a third to myself that lists what I will do if he calls or shows up or if anyone asks for comment. I press save. I turn my phone face down and listen to the rain soften. I am not the story he told. I am not a favor he will do after his promotion or a problem he will solve with timing. I am not small. Morning is coming, and with it the first step. I breathe, stretch my fingers, and let the quiet fill the room. I know exactly what needs to happen, and exactly who I need to be to make it happen. I do not need his permission to start. 6 months earlier, I turn a key in a brand new deadbolt, and the door slides open like a stage curtain. Morning fills the Harbor City high-rise with the kind of sunlight that makes everything look like it belongs to you. Daniel laughs behind me and lifts the box-marked kitchen while I stand there, breathing in paint and promise. It is the first place that has our names on the lease. The first time the countdown that lived in our phones for 3 years is over. We walk from room to room naming corners. He calls the window wall his favorite, and says we will watch boats crawl across the water while we eat late dinners and decide the rest of our lives. I call the tiny entry table mine, and say a bowl should go there for keys so we never lose them again. We move the couch twice and the bed once, and pretend we are easy people who can agree on lamps without thinking hard. He orders breakfast sandwiches to the lobby, and we eat them on the floor with our backs against the carton-labeled books. When I look at him, I think this is what steady feels like. The long-distance years taught me how to miss in measured amounts and how to reach for patience when the signal cut out. Now I can reach and touch his shoulder, and not a screen. During that first weekend, we tour his family rituals like rooms. Sunday dinner starts at 5 with a slow arrival of aunts and cousins, and a basket for phones at Grandma Eliza's request. She holds a wooden spoon like a baton, and taps the rim of the pot when conversation gets loud. She asks me about my work, and listens all the way to the end. Irene, his mother, is efficient in the kitchen and precise about dish towels and says tradition keeps people from floating off. Tom, his father, tells a story about his first apartment and how the landlord called the place a garden level, even though it was basement, and everyone laughs. The family group chat pings after dessert with photos and a caption about good soup and good news and welcome Mia. I save the picture because I like the way Daniel looks when he is surrounded and relaxed. The first hairline crack is small and I almost miss it. It is a Wednesday when we come home from errands and the apartment smells like citrus cleaner. The fridge holds a neat line of glass containers labeled with the date and a sticky note that says stocked up. Irene steps out of the bedroom holding the extra set of sheets from the closet and smiles like this is the most natural thing. She says family does not need permission, and that she made a copy of the key after Daniel left his on the counter last week. She waves the key once like a charm, and sets the sheets on the bed. My mouth opens, and I do not find words right away. I thank her for the groceries, because they are generous, and I ask if next time she can text first because I was not expecting anyone. She pats my arm and says had she texted it would not have been a surprise. Daniel walks her to the elevator and comes back with a line about how his mom means well and how she did the same thing for his sister when Natalie moved into her first place. He says it is cultural closeness and that a copied key is a sign of trust. I nod and say I understand, and I open the Notes app and write the date and the sentence copied key without notice because I grew up learning that writing something down helps you make sense of it later. That night I move the key bowl to the bedroom and tell myself it is to keep the entry table clear. The second crack hides inside kindness. We celebrate our first paycheck in the new city, and he surprises me with dinner at a place where the waiter pulls out my chair. Daniel orders for us with confidence, steak for him and salmon for me, because he says I always end up choosing it anyway, and it saves time. I smile because choosing can take me a while, and because the waiter is waiting. When the plates arrive, I eat and tell myself it is sweet that he remembers my preferences, and that care comes in many shapes. The third arrives as advice. We walk through a store, and he lifts a dress from the rack and says this one is more client-ready and that I should think about how patterns come across on camera during presentations. He says my voice could be a little lower at the end of sentences for authority and that we can practice. He kisses my forehead when I agree and says we make each other better, and that is what partnership means. I put the dress in the cart and wonder if authority can be borrowed like a jacket. Tasha visits and sits on our couch and watches me talk with my hands folded tighter than I used to. She asks if I am happy and I say yes, and it is mostly true. I tell her the view makes mornings feel like fresh starts and that the Carters know how to fill a room with food and plans. Later I brush my teeth and look at my face and try to measure whether I take up the same amount of space as before. I decide I do and that new places make people quiet while they learn the room. The family chat keeps humming. A cousin posts a video about pantry organization and tags me and writes, "Teach Mia." It is meant as a joke. I send a laughing emoji and save a screenshot in the same folder where I keep lease paperwork and appliance manuals and the note about the key. I fall asleep, thinking about the bowl on the entry table and whether names on a lease can be the same length while feeling different weights in a home. I tell myself, growing pains come with every start. I sleep well and wake to a sunlight that makes me believe it. I start collecting small proofs the way people collect recipes. Grocery receipts go in a folder. Screenshots live in an album with a boring name so I will not have to explain it to anyone. I tell myself it is for budgeting, and then I admit it is because I feel steadier when facts have dates beside them. Daniel calls it being organized and claps when I create a shared spreadsheet for household costs. He takes that as a cue to review every line. He circles the bread brand and says the other one lasts longer. He points to coffee and says we can get the same roast cheaper online. He asks if I really need fresh flowers and then softens his tone and says he only wants us to hit our goals faster. I nod and say sure because it is easier to learn a sales cycle than to disagree. Meals become a place where he performs care and control at the same time. He learns the names of servers and orders before I open my menu. He calls it confidence. At home he tastes the pasta sauce and says his grandmother would add a pinch of sugar and that I should let him show me. He uses the word we until he wants it precise, and then it becomes I and you. When I plate dinner, he snaps a photo and laughs when I tilt the bowl for the light. Later he edits the picture and writes a caption about partnership, and the comments call us goals. I log off early and rinse the plates until the water runs cold. Work talk follows him through the door like a third roommate. He practices pitch lines to the living room window and asks me to rate his voice on a scale from confident to commanding. When I answer, he adjusts the tie he is not wearing and asks for another take. He says my voice lifts at the end of sentences and offers to help me practice sounding certain. He says clients read tone more than content and that I should try longer pauses. He has me repeat a line from my presentation until my throat feels tight. He kisses my hair and calls it progress and says we will win next quarter because we are sharpening each other. The family chat hums all day some days. A cousin posts a story about a bride who forgot name cards and writes, "See Mia, this is why lists matter." Irene replies with a heart and a spoon emoji and says, "Our Mia is learning so fast." I type a smile and a thank you and then take a screenshot and name it with the date. Natalie sends me a photo of Grandma Eliza watching game shows and asks when I can come by for tea. I stare at the screen and feel my ribs loosen. I send her times and she replies that she will pick me up because parking is a mess. When I mention this plan to Daniel, he smiles and says his sister is the only person who still drives across town for a good conversation. Money edges into our language like a scorekeeper. My cart total becomes a number we review. I bring home store-brand paper towels and he jokes that I am growing up. The joke hangs in the kitchen air longer than he thinks. When I say I want to take Tasha to a gallery, he asks for the ticket price and whether the collection rotates often enough to justify the cost. He shows me his budgeting app and color-coded categories and says structure is freedom. I build a quiet category that is only for me and leave the label blank. Tasha notices everything I try not to name. We meet after work and split fries, and she asks why I pause before I order food I already know I like. She says my laugh used to arrive before the joke. She squeezes my hand and tells me I can call her at any hour and mean it. I tell her I am fine and that I am tired from early meetings, and that the city moves faster than our old one. She tilts her head and looks at me the way people look at paintings, to see what changed since the last visit. I promise to text when I get home, and I do, and she sends a row of hearts that feel like air. At home, I try on a dress I bought on sale and check myself in the mirror. the color makes me happy. Daniel walks in and smiles and says it is pretty, and then says the cut reads casual for an event where partners bring spouses. He says a blazer would fix it, and that we can go shopping this weekend for something sharper. He kisses my shoulder and says he is proud of me, and that image matters because people decide in seconds whether to listen. I fold the dress carefully, and hang it back up, and set the blazer on the chair, and tell myself there is no harm in trying on a new shape. We plan a brunch with his parents and he texts me the menu ahead of time and suggests I choose before we arrive so I will not feel rushed. When I laugh, he grins and says he knows me and wants to set me up to win. At the table, Irene asks how work is and offers tips on navigating office friendships. Tom tells a story about a manager who confused kindness for weakness and how he learned to speak up without raising his voice. I am quiet and listen, and find myself studying their faces for clues about what kind of family I am joining. Grandma Eliza passes me extra berries and whispers that I do not have to finish any story on someone else's timetable. The spoon taps the bowl and conversation shifts, and a nod I did not know I was holding unwinds by an inch. Back home, the key bowl glints in the bedroom, and I take inventory of what I am learning. I am learning the layout of a family that loves loudly and sets rules that arrive wrapped in jokes. I am learning the shape of Daniel's ambition and the way it rearranges the furniture in our days. I am learning that I can agree and still feel a small protest rise like breath. I am learning that records help when memory gets polite. I am learning to watch myself as if I am someone I am responsible for keeping safe. Saturday starts with a list on the fletter counter and 2 coffee mugs cooling beside it. We are supposed to make Grandma Eliza's brunch by noon, and Daniel wants the apartment photo ready first. I vacuum while he wipes the counters, and at first we move like people who practice this dance. Then he spots a streak on the stainless steel and starts explaining circles versus lines like I have never cleaned anything. I say I will redo it after I finish the hallway, and he says I am not hearing him. I reach for the spray and he reaches for my wrist to stop me, and his fingers land harder than he means. The grip shocks me enough that the bottle slips from my other hand and hits the floor with a dull sound. He lets go and I step back without thinking. The air between us turns very still. His face changes fast. The instruction leaves and the apology arrives. He says my name like he is calling me from a distance. He says he is sorry and that he is under pressure, and that we should have started earlier, and that the brunch is important to his mother, and that he wanted us to look like we have it all together. I press my wrist against my thigh and nod and say, "It is fine." He says it is not fine, and that he hates himself for snapping. He asks to see and I say it is nothing. He promises it will never happen again, and I tell him we are going to be late. In the bathroom, I turn on the faucet so the mirror will not fog, and I lift my sleeve. Small marks are beginning to bloom where his fingers landed. I take a picture with the timer on so it does not save to the shared album, and then I lower my sleeve and breathe through my mouth until the sting calms. I name the photo with the date and time and move it to a folder that already holds screenshots and receipts. When I look up, I catch my own eyes. They look like they are waiting for permission to tell the truth. I say one sentence out loud so there will be a record inside me too. If it happens again, I leave. We arrive late to brunch and blame traffic. Irene's spoon taps the rim of a pot and conversation lifts to welcome us. She passes me berries and says it is a blessing to be busy and that couples who keep a home together last. Daniel squeezes my knee under the table like a secret apology, and I keep my smile steady. When Grandma asks how work is going, he answers for both of us, and I let him, because I do not trust my voice to hold the shape I need. Back home, he brings a vase of grocery store tulips to the kitchen and says he wants to reset. He talks about new systems and better communication and chores by category so we do not step on each other. He opens a note on his phone and drafts a plan. Monday he cooks. Tuesday I handle laundry. Saturday we clean together with no deadlines. He says we should both build in buffers before family events so the little things do not snowball. He is calm and careful, and he keeps saying we and us like the words can pad sharp corners. I listen and nod and think about how many times he has said, "We can fix this if we just plan." At night I shower with the door locked and lotion my wrist with slow hands. The skin is tender where rings of color are forming. I hold my phone and search for a counseling center that takes evening appointments and star a hotline number for later, even though I hope I will not need it. I open my journal and write down what happened in plain language without metaphors, so I cannot soften it later. He grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave a bruise. He apologized. He promised it would not happen again. I draw a small box beside the sentence and leave it empty because I am not ready to check anything off. He comes to bed quiet and careful and asks if I am awake. He tells me he was wrong, and that stress does not excuse anything, and that he loves me, and that we are bigger than one bad morning. He says he will book a session with the employee assistance counselor at the firm and will learn how to communicate when he is tight with deadlines. He puts his hand near my arm and asks for permission to hold me. I let him because I am tired, and because the apology is soft, and because the promise sounds like a bridge I want to cross. My body stays watchful, even as I sleep. On Sunday I wear long sleeves and tell Tasha by text that I cannot make the gallery because I need to catch up on laundry. She replies with a heart and says next weekend, and I type, "Can we plan for that?" Natalie sends a photo of Grandma's crossword and asks if I can come by for tea after work sometime this week. I say yes and feel both grateful and frightened by how much I want to sit in a quiet kitchen and be asked ordinary questions. In the mirror that night, I lift my sleeve again. The marks are darker and I take a second photo. I can hear Daniel in the other room practicing a pitch line for a meeting and adjusting the cadence of a joke he tells near the closing slide. I turn off the bathroom light and rest my palm on the doorframe until the hallway comes into focus. The sentence I said to myself that morning is still there. If it happens again, I leave. Speaking it did not make the room spin. It made it solid. I fold my sleeve back down and walk into the living room and sit on the end of the couch and listen to him rehearse. My hands are steady in my lap. I know what I will do if the box in my journal needs a check. The voice memo is only half a minute, but I give it the weight of a deposition. I replay it with headphones and write what I hear line by line so my brain cannot edit for comfort. His stride changes at the curb because the background goes from traffic to a bar door opening. He calls me fragile and says timing matters for appearances. He says respect faded and he will let me down easy once his next review is locked. When I finish the transcript, I add the date and the timestamp and save a copy in 2 places that are mine alone. I watch the file upload. Then I record a short video on my phone that shows the memo on the screen and the clock in the corner, so the record carries its own proof. I check my settings and remove location sharing. I log out of the shared calendar and turn off device backups that feed the home tablet because I do not want a copy of my night living there. I create a new email alias and forward keynotes to it. I set a short code word with Tasha in case I need help fast, and put the hotline number at the top of my favorites list. I am not planning for catastrophe. I am planning for steadiness. The ring is brighter under the kitchen light than it ever looked in my hand. I hold it for a minute to see if it still knows my finger. It does not. I set it on the hardback he keeps by the couch because it will be the first thing he sees when he sits down. I take a single photo, not for posting but so the memory has edges. I open the drawer where we keep the leases and pull out my copy. I photograph the pages that name the emergency contact and the order for maintenance requests. I will not use those tonight. I just want to remember that my name is present on paper, even when I feel invisible in a room. I move through the apartment with a small list. Passport and birth certificate into the folder. 2 charges and the spare phone battery in the side pocket. The bracelet my mother gave me into a cloth bag because it clicked against metal when I tried to pack it loose. I slide the folder into my tote and zip it all the way closed because zipped things are less likely to spill when you are changing direction fast. The last stop is the storage unit 2 blocks over where we keep off-season clothes and extra books. I have the key in my coat pocket and a new padlock from the hardware store that I bought the day his mother waved a copied key like it was a crown. I tell myself I am not frightened of her. I am respectful of my own boundary. I unlock the unit and breathe in dust and cardboard, and the odd calm of old sweaters. I put the new lock on, and turn it until it clicks, and I write the new code in my notes. I take the box, with my journals and the shoebox with letters I want to keep out of reach. They ride in the back seat like passengers. At the hotel, I lay everything out on the bed and take inventory again. Documents, photos, the recorded memo, the journal entries with dates, the picture of the ring sitting where I left it. I write headings in a clean document labeled Day 1 so the next steps do not get tangled with feelings. I draft the email to his manager and HR. I do not describe heartbreak. I describe patterns and dates and a concern about values and safety. I reference the copied key incident as a boundary and security issue rather than a family quirk. I attach one photo of my wrist and one screenshot of a message where he mentions losing his temper and wanting to do better. I save the draft and schedule it for 9. I write a second message to the client liaison that sticks to reputation and alignment. I am careful with every sentence. I do not diagnose, I do not accuse, in broad strokes. I connect a private pattern with a public risk and ask them to manage it internally. I schedule that one for noon. I text Tasha that I am safe at a hotel and that I will send her my location in the morning. She replies in 1 minute and asks if I want her to sit with me or wait in the lobby. I tell her I want her to sleep and that knowing she can come is enough. I send her the code word, and she sends back a confirmation, and a heart, and a reminder to drink water. Before bed, I take the ring's photo and the wrist photo and the memo transcript, and I print each to a secure PDF with timestamps. I put them in a folder named with today's date, because clarity helps future me. I set my alarm for 8:30, and watch the rain thin to a mist that looks like the city is finally taking a breath. I climb under the covers, in a bed that has never heard my name, and I feel the kind of quiet that is not empty but earned. In the morning I will send the emails, in the afternoon I will write the post that says I am choosing peace. Tonight I am a person who heard the truth out loud and answered it with action. I am holding my own key in a room that no one else can enter. I am not waiting for permission to leave or permission to heal. I lock the door, and the click sounds like a small promise I intend to keep. I wake to a pale square of light on the hotel wall and the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own plans. At 8:40 I read my drafts one more time to make sure every sentence holds to dates and actions. At 9, exactly the first email leaves my outbox to Daniel's manager and to HR with compliance copied. The subject line is simple, and the body stays inside facts. I include the wrist photograph with its timestamp and a short paragraph about the copied key incident framed as a home security concern that created fear and loss of safety. I reference 2 moments at company functions where voice and image coaching crossed into public correction that left me embarrassed. I confirm that I am not seeking public attention and that I am asking for an internal review and a safe channel to provide more detail if needed. The delivery notifications arrive with their routine language. HR sends an acknowledgement within minutes and offers 2 appointment windows for a confidential interview with a case number in the subject line. Compliance writes that they take values alignment seriously and will coordinate with HR. I answer both with gratitude and select the later window, so I have time to gather what I want to say without rushing. I create a folder named with the case number and drop in copies of everything I may need so I can click instead of scramble. At noon, the second message goes to the philanthropy liaison at the marquee client. I keep it respectful and precise. I say I am writing as a private citizen who cares about the work they fund, and that a senior associate connected with their account is under internal review for behavior that may not reflect the possession. Client's stated commitment to dignity and safety. I provide no names in the first paragraph and offer to share documentation with the appropriate channel if their ethics policy requires it. I ask them to manage the information discreetly to protect survivors of harm. An auto-reply lands first. Then a short note follows from the liaison an hour later thanking me for the alert and confirming that they will route the concern to their compliance committee. The message closes with a line I read twice. We appreciate your care for the integrity of the work. I take a break and step outside for a slow walk around the block. The city air is warm and damp and smells like rain lifting from concrete. I buy a bottle of water from the corner shop and text Tasha that the morning went as planned. She responds with a green check and asks if I have eaten. I get a sandwich and bring it back to the room, because small things that look like ordinary life help anchor the day. In the afternoon, I write a post for my personal accounts that says, I am choosing peace and focusing on my health, and that I am grateful for friends who make room for honest conversations. I do not hint or accuse. I choose a picture of the river I took last fall that shows a path and tall grass, and the sky opening. The notifications start bubbling with quiet support. A college friend writes that she is proud of me without asking for details. My sister calls, and I let it go to voicemail, and then send a text that I am safe and will call her tomorrow. I am learning that I can answer on my own timeline. I review the protections on my phone and laptop, and set stricter privacy on old albums. I export the family group chat for the past 2 months, and save a copy as a PDF, so the jokes that were not jokes do not depend on memory. I print a clean timeline for myself and place it under the computer like a placemat, a map with dates and nouns. Under a new heading, I list what I will not do. I will not argue in texts. I will not respond to bait. I will not explain my worth in a phone call. I will not post more than that one message. As late afternoon drifts toward evening, I rehearse 3 sentences for unexpected calls. Thank you for checking on me. I am safe. I have a process in place, and I am following it. I write them on a card and place it by the phone so I can read if my hands shake. When an unknown number rings, I let it go to voicemail, and when the message tries to sound concerned while asking for details, I save it in a folder called Records and block the number. Before dinner, I open the case folder and prepare for tomorrow's interview with HR. I arrange screenshots and notes in the order I would like to speak them, so the story does not collapse into feeling. I include the copied key entry as a boundary breach with safety consequences rather than a family misunderstanding so no one can reduce it to a joke. I end my outline with a request for a written summary of the meeting because paper keeps people honest. Night settles and the hotel room hums with the soft sounds of other lives on the other side of the wall. I close the laptop and sit with a cup of tea and let my breathing lengthen. Today was the day the plan started to live outside my head. I did not chase sympathy. I built a trail. I did not shout. I pressed send with care. I am allowed to claim a peaceful evening after that. I finish the tea and set the cup in the sink, and turn off the light with the simple pleasure of ending a day I steered. By midweek, the plan feels like a routine I can trust. I answer only numbers with names attached, and I add every new message to the same neat folder. In the early afternoon, my phone pings with a screenshot from a former colleague who still sits 3 floors below Daniel. The image shows a Slack thread from a private channel that looks anything but private. A junior associate named Evan is speculating that I torpedoed Daniel after a scene at a charity event. He calls it a tantrum, with a winking emoji, and adds that some people should not date above their weight. The timestamp is that morning. The thread has a run of laughing faces. My hands go cold first and then hot. I thank my friend and ask her to email the raw file with headers intact. She does in 5 minutes. I take a breath and write to the compliance contact I met yesterday. I keep my voice level and professional, and attach the screenshot and the forwarded email with the file history. I reference the company policy on anti-retaliation and harassment and ask that the Slack channel be preserved for review. I also ask that my name be removed from any internal rumor mill, since I am a reporting party with a case number. I request written confirmation that the materials are under hold. The reply arrives before I can close the tab. The message is brief and firm, and confirms a hold on the workspace and a notice to the manager on that team. A lifestyle blogger with a large local following sends me a direct message asking for comment on whispers about a broken engagement and a firm scandal. I type 3 sentences on a note card first so I do not improvise. I tell her I am not offering details, and that I believe in private processes that protect people who come forward. I thank her for reaching out and send nothing more. Then I forward the exchange to compliance and mark it as external spread so they understand the timeline pressure. My phone starts to buzz with people who want the story to be a story before the facts are gathered. I answer no one who wants entertainment. HR calls and asks if I am able to move my interview to the morning. I agree. The director says Daniel has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation and that they are notifying affected accounts. She speaks with the calm of someone who has done this before, and I feel the knot between my shoulders loosen by a degree. When we hang up, I write down the time and her exact phrasing and file it in the case folder. I walk to the corner for fresh air and put on sunglasses even though the sky is a thin gray. I text Tasha a photo of the sandwich in my hand as proof I remembered to eat. She sends back a muscle emoji and a line that reads document and drink water. I smile because she knows a day like this is both a bureaucracy and a body. On the way back, a drizzle starts and makes the sidewalk smell like a new start. I tuck my phone away so I will not be tempted to check it while crossing the street. Back in the room, I print the company code of conduct and highlight the sections on whistleblower protection and social media. I am not an employee, but I am a reporting party, and culture is a set of habits that touches anyone nearby. I place the printout under my outline for tomorrow so I can ask clear questions about how they plan to handle internal chatter and leaks. My computer dings with a new email. Compliance has escalated the Slack thread to HR with a recommendation for immediate corrective action. The message includes a copy of the internal notice, reminding staff that speculation about ongoing reviews violates policy. I read it twice and file it. At 4, a colleague sends another screenshot. Evan has reacted to his own earlier joke with a string of faces that look like he is trying to laugh through fear. Someone has replied with a link to the policy and a single word that says, "Yikes." I do not take pleasure in the panic. I take a screenshot and add it to the chain. A manager from that floor reaches out through HR to apologize for the rumor crossing teams and to confirm that the firm has begun a culture audit of channels where off-color commentary has been common. I ask that this message be included in the case file. As evening sits down over the city, the local blogger posts a vague note about values at work and sources say without names. Messages start arriving from people who like puzzles. I let them arrive and do not answer. I write 3 lines in my journal about what it feels like to be cast as a caricature, and then I write a 4th about how quickly a clean process can anchor a day when chaos wants the wheel. I light a candle from a travel tin in my bag and watch it burn steady. I am not here to convince the internet I am real. I am here to keep my promise to myself. Just before I close my laptop, an email slides in from HR, confirming that participants in the Slack thread have been contacted and that managers received directives about retaliation and confidentiality. They thank me for providing documentation, and they ask if I need an outside advocate on the call tomorrow. I say yes, and they add a name to the calendar invite. The screen finally goes dark, and I sit with the sound of the air conditioner and my own breathing. The rumor turned into evidence and evidence turned into action. The plan is doing its work even while other people are busy performing theirs. Tomorrow will ask for the same steadiness and I have it to give. Natalie texts just after sunrise and asks if we can meet at a coffee shop near the botanical garden because she has something I should see. I stare at the message long enough to feel my pulse slow rather than speed. I tell her I can be there in an hour. I choose a seat near the window where I can watch the street, and I keep my phone face up on the table. She arrives in a navy sweater and the same careful expression she wore the night of her parents' anniversary dinner. She wraps her hands around her cup like it is a hand warmer and says thank you for coming, in a voice that sounds both older and kinder than before. I ask how she is, and she says she is embarrassed and angry, and also grateful that I answered. She reaches into her purse and sets a small stack of index cards between us. Each card has a date and 2 or 3 lines about a call from her brother. She says she started writing things down when she realized she felt sick after their conversations. She turns the top card around so it faces me. He told her she was too sensitive. He said I made him feel trapped when I asked for clarity. He said he respected me less than he used to. She swallows and says she did not like the way her own handwriting looked after that. And that is when she called me to see if I was free for tea, and I said yes. And then the family calendar filled up, and the night moved on without the talk she wanted to have. I keep my breathing slow because there is a second voice in my head that wants to jump across the table and hug her as if hugs can rewind a year. I tell her the HR interview is today, and that I am grateful she reached out before it. I ask if she is willing to send those notes to the director so there is a record that does not depend on me. She nods and pulls out her phone and photographs each card and emails them to me, and then asks for the case number so she can send them directly as well. She takes a breath and asks if I remember the moment at the anniversary dinner when the wine glass tipped. I say yes. She says she watched me brace for the sound and for his reaction. She says it was small and fast and she thought she imagined it until that night when she lay awake and realized she had seen me flinch more than once. She meets my eyes and says she is sorry for not pulling me aside sooner. I tell her I am not interested in punishing people who are doing the right thing now. I ask her to keep stacking small right things. She nods and I can see her shoulders settle. She looks down at the last card and says, "There is something else." In his last call before I left, he compared me to someone named Elaine and said he was tired of women who changed after the honeymoon stage of a relationship. Natalie says she found an old photo on a shelf at her parents' house and remembered that Elaine disappeared from their lives fast. She asked Daniel once and he said the breakup was mutual, and then made a joke about people who cannot handle ambition. Natalie's mouth tightens at the word ambition. She says she looked for Elaine online and found a new name on a different coast and nothing else. She says she feels a responsibility to reach out and warn her that she was not the only one who felt small around him. I tell her I would like to talk to Elaine if she is willing, and that I will follow whatever pace Elaine chooses. We sit in quiet for a minute, while the coffee shop door swings open and closed on a small morning crowd. Natalie says she knows her mother will try to manage this like a public relations problem, and that her father will try to fix it with a statement and a check. She says she will not be doing either. She asks what I need. I tell her I need a short written account of what she observed at family events and what Daniel said in the calls she remembers best. I ask her to send it before noon, so HR has something independent of me to weigh. She types as I talk and asks if this is enough. I tell her it is more than enough, and that a sister willing to speak plainly is a kind of door that lets air in. Before we stand, she places the index cards back in her purse and sets one on the table for me with a line I have not heard. He said he would end it after the review, and that he did not want to make a scene. I feel a clean line of heat run across my chest and then leave just as fast. I thank her for trusting me, and for trusting her own eyes. Outside the air smells like damp leaves and sidewalks cooling. My phone buzzes with a calendar reminder for the HR call, and I begin to walk toward a day that now includes another steady witness. I feel taller by an inch, and I decide to keep that inch. I decide that I will not give it back. Sunday smells like roast chicken and citrus cleaner at the Carter house, and the driveway is already full when I step out of the rideshare with a canvas tote and a steady breath. Irene opens the door before I knock and folds me into a hug that is careful and practiced. She says she has been worried and that family should not keep score. She leads me past the foyer mirror and into a dining room set for 12 with linen napkins and place cards that match the floral centerpiece. Cousins turn their heads as if the room just got brighter. I set the tote near the sideboard and ask if I may collect a few things from the study after dinner. Irene smiles and says, "Of course," and thanks me for being gracious. I can feel the script she wants me to read, and I decide to use my own voice. Tom stands and taps his glass with the back of a fork, and welcomes everyone with the tone of a man who likes order. He says it is good to be together, and that nothing is more important than unity. Natalie meets my eyes from across the table and gives me the smallest nod. Daniel is not here. His chair is empty, and the absence sits like a folded coat. The cousins begin the first volley of small talk about game scores and commute times. Irene keeps the bowls moving as if momentum could solve everything. Halfway through the salad course, a cousin makes a light comment about how couples have tiffs and how young people post too much online when they are upset. The table laughs a little and looks down. I sip water and set the glass down slowly. I tell the cousin I am not upset and that I am careful with my words in public. I say I am committed to privacy and to processes that protect people. I do not raise my voice. I do not smile to shrink the truth. The cousin nods and says of course, and lifts a fork of greens. When the main course arrives, Irene announces that she stopped by my apartment earlier in the week to stock the fridge since she had a free afternoon. She says she would have texted but she wanted it to be a surprise, and she thought it would save me time. I set my fork down and keep my hands visible on the tablecloth. I say I appreciate the intention and that entering a home without the resident present is not a surprise. I say a copied key is a security breach in a city where people learn those words early. I say my boundary is a locked door and a text first. The room goes very quiet in a way that feels like a classroom right before a lesson lands. Irene starts to explain that her family has always shared keys and that trust looks like access. I tell her trust looks like consent, and that consent is a word I want in every room I live in. Tom clears his throat and says he did not fully understand what had been happening, and that he is sorry for not paying attention sooner. He says he teaches young men to be direct at work, and yet somehow he missed where direct turned into controlling at his own table. He looks older as he speaks, and I watch a man learn in real time. A cousin who lives across town folds her napkin and says she will be returning the spare key to her sister tonight because she has been letting herself in to water plants without asking. Another cousin who liked to tease in the group chat gets very busy cutting carrots that do not need cutting. Natalie breathes out like someone finished a long race. I pick up the ring box from my tote and stand. I thank the table for dinner and for hearing me. I say I want to return something that is not mine anymore, and I do it here because silence lets confusion grow, and I want clarity to have a seat. I place the box on the linen near Tom, and say I wish your son the help he needs, and that my choice is not a performance, it is a boundary. I add that I will be arranging a time to remove my belongings from the shared apartment, and that I will come with a friend. I ask that the copied key be destroyed. Irene opens her mouth and then closes it. Tom nods and says yes. Natalie says she will bring a small envelope for the key at the end of the night. Dessert arrives as if the room needs sugar to absorb what just happened. Grandma Eliza lifts her spoon and in that gentle tap I hear approval. She asks me if I will take some soup home because soup helps on complicated weeks. I say yes and feel something in my chest unclench. Irene brings an envelope with a single key and says she is sorry for assuming access meant care. I take the envelope and thank her for saying the word sorry without putting a ribbon on it. After coffee, I step into the study and collect 2 books, a scarf, and a small framed photo that shows a younger me laughing with my mouth open. Natalie joins me at the door and whispers that she sent her notes to HR and that she is available for questions. I tell her I am grateful and that she made today possible. When I walk back through the dining room, the cousins watch me like people who just learned a new rule that is really an old rule finally spoken. I leave with soup, my envelope, and the kind of quiet that follows a public line drawn clean. Monday starts with Grandma Eliza's soup cooling on the hotel desk beside my laptop and the case number written on a sticky note like a compass. At 10, I join the HR interview with their director and an outside advocate on the call. I speak from the outline I built so my voice keeps shape. Dates first, then the copied key as a security breach, then the pattern of public corrections that trained me to shrink. When I finish, the director thanks me without softening anything and confirms Daniel remains on leave while they expand the review to adjacent teams. She asks permission to contact Natalie directly about her notes and I say yes. I request a written summary and she agrees to send it by close of business. When the call ends, I lay the phone down and let the quiet confirm that I did the part only I could do. Natalie's text lands a minute later. Check your email. Subject line, Introduction. Her message is brief and careful. Mia, this is Elaine. She's open to talking. An email follows like a door opening. Elaine writes from a new address that carries her changed last name and a city far away. She says we can talk at noon her time, and asks for 30 minutes, because she is learning how to tell her story without feeling like she has to sprint. I say 30 is perfect. When she calls, I hear a kettle click off in the background and a dog shake its collar. She speaks in a steady tone that makes it easier to listen. She says his attention felt like warmth at first, and then like a light that always pointed at her flaws. He called it coaching. She says she started asking permission for small choices, so he would not have to correct her later. She says a friend stopped visiting because she felt watched, and that the apartment grew quiet in a way that sounded like she was doing something right. Then she names a day she left with 2 bags and a bruised confidence, moved across the country, and started again with a name that belonged only to her. She tells me she wrote down what she remembers as it returned, and that she is willing to send a statement to HR and to anyone lawful who needs it. She says the hardest part is believing she did not imagine the whole thing because nothing looked dramatic on paper. I tell her that records make small harms visible to people who prefer not to see them, and that she does not owe anyone a spectacle. We agree she will send her statement to the director with my case number in the subject line and copy me. When we hang up, I feel the room gain weight in a good way, like furniture settling where it belongs. An hour later, HR forwards a message to me from compliance. Effective immediately. Daniel's client accounts are paused pending outcome, and the board liaison for the marquee client has been notified of a process review. The note thanks me for routing external inquiries to them and confirms a written communications plan for staff to prevent rumor from standing in for policy. Attached is the formal reminder that retaliation includes casual commentary on internal platforms. I print it and place it under my notebook with the other papers that help me breathe. Near 3, my phone rings from a city number. Detective Rivera introduces herself from the family safety unit with a calm that sounds like a safe hallway. She says the firm referred concerns and that my documentation lines up with 2 other reports already in her system. She asks if I would like to do a recorded intake this week to preserve the timeline while I decide what I want to pursue. She explains options the way good teachers lay out a syllabus. An order of protection, charges the DA could consider, victim services for counseling and safety planning. She emphasizes choice. I say yes to an intake tomorrow afternoon. She asks if I feel safe tonight, and I tell her I am at a hotel, and that my locks are new, and my plan is on paper. She gives me a direct number and a second one for after hours, and I write them on the same sticky where the case number lives. I text Tasha the update, and she sends back a choir of praise hands and a question about dinner. We meet 2 blocks away for takeout eaten on a bench, where the evening air smells like food carts and wet pavement. I tell her about Elaine's voice, and the way it steadied my own. I tell her about Detective Rivera's questions that felt like railings. She says she never doubted me, but she did not expect the system to move. I tell her I did not either, and I am learning that documented patience is a kind of leverage. Back at the hotel, I open the email from HR with the summary of my interview. It is clean and specific. Names, dates, policies cited. I reply to confirm accuracy and add Elaine's statement to the folder when it arrives, efficient and brave at once. I skim the family chat export and see that the cousin who joked about lists deleted 2 comments. I do not care about disappearing messages when I have PDFs. Night finds me stacking papers at right angles and taping a simple timeline to the wall above the desk. Call, email, interview, statement, referral. The line does not care about drama. It cares about sequence. Systems are moving. The past is speaking in voices that match each other. My job is to keep the file open, and my shoulders down. I turn off the light and let the city's low hum replace the one that used to live in my chest. Tomorrow I will answer more questions. Tonight I am allowed to rest in a room where every door opens with a key I chose. The ballroom smells like coffee and stage lights, and the screen behind the podium reads, "Values in Action," in a typeface that wants to be trusted. I take a chair near the aisle with a clear view of the exit and text Tasha my location like we agreed. The philanthropy liaison spots me and gives a small nod that feels like permission to breathe. Around me are clients, staff, and people who run programs that live or die on donations. A trio of cameras stand like tall plants in the back. On the dais, the head of compliance steps to the microphone in a navy suit and a steady voice. She starts with numbers about volunteer hours and match grants, and then says the part that tilts the room. She says Arden and Cole Wealth is strengthening its code of conduct, effective immediately. She says the firm has concluded an internal review that resulted in the termination for cause of a senior associate for violations related to dignity and safety. She thanks the individuals who brought concerns forward and the colleagues who cooperated with the process. She does not name anyone, she does not soften the verbs. She turns to the slide that lists actions with dates. Mandatory training is not the headline. The headline is enforcement. Phones appear and then disappear as people remember where they are. A reporter from a local business paper lifts a hand during the questions and is handed a microphone. She asks about the culture on internal platforms and whether leadership saw the Slack jokes that treated people like punchlines. She asks how the firm plans to handle rumor and retaliation going forward. The head of compliance stays at the podium and says the audit is complete and corrective steps have already begun. She says several employees have been disciplined for conduct on internal channels, including formal censure and role changes where appropriate. She says retaliation in any form will be treated as a breach of trust and policy, and that documentation matters more than volume. I feel the words land in my chest like a door clicking shut on a draft. Across the room I spot Irene and Tom near a table of board members from a civic council. Irene holds her clutch like it is a lifeline, and Tom's jaw is set in a way I have not seen. Natalie is closer to the back where I am, and she gives me the smallest wave. I do not move to them. I keep my seat and my breath even. This moment is not about being seen. It is about a system saying out loud what it is prepared to do. The liaison brings up a director from a shelter that helped design the new boundaries training. The director speaks about how respect is not a poster but a set of small daily choices. She thanks the firm for listening when survivors said privacy and speed are both essential. She says the real work begins when the cameras turn away and the calendar flips. People clap because the sentence has the weight of something true. When the business reporter asks whether the terminated associate handled accounts connected to the philanthropic partner on stage, the head of compliance answers yes, in a sentence that protects confidentiality while refusing to blur the edges. She confirms the client board's ethics committee participated and that the firm is grateful for constructive oversight. She ends by stating that the investigation included interviews beyond the initial complaint and that patterns, not moments, guide their decisions. I do not realize I was holding my breath until the exhale makes me lightheaded for 1 second. After the program breaks for coffee, a manager from a floor I used to visit nods as he passes and says quietly that he is sorry for the noise and that the notice about retaliation changed the way people talk. His eyes flick to the cameras and back to me. He does not ask for details or offer a speech. He gives me a sentence I can file as evidence that a room can learn. Near the side doors I see Evan standing alone with a lanyard in his hand. He looks younger without a screen. His badge now lists a different team, and he keeps finding something to study on the carpet. He does not approach me. He does not look up when a colleague slaps his shoulder in a way that used to be a joke. The head of compliance steps off the dais and speaks to a cluster of staff with the calm of someone who will repeat this message as many times as needed. The reporter packs up her notes. The cameras go still. I find the philanthropy liaison near the exit and thank her for insisting on a process where dignity is not a slogan. She squeezes my hand and says integrity is a habit you can measure. As I step into the hallway, I pass Irene and Tom. He gives a small nod that reads like acknowledgement. Irene starts to say my name and then stops. Natalie joins me by the elevator and asks if I am ready to go. I say yes, and we ride down in a box of mirrors, where my shoulders look lower than they did a month ago. Outside, the afternoon is bright and ordinary. The public part happened. The system said its piece. I can feel my balance return like a tide that knows how to find shore. Detective Rivera meets me in a quiet interview room that smells faintly like coffee and copy paper. She moves at a pace that keeps my breathing even. We go over the timeline once more so every date lines up on their side. She asks if I want to petition for a temporary protective order, and I say yes because sleep is easier when the law stands at the door with you. The paperwork is clear, and the clerk across the hall reads my affidavit with care. By late afternoon, a judge signs the order, and a court officer explains what it means in simple language. No contact in any form. No surprise arrivals. A bright sheet of paper with my name on it becomes a kind of key I did not know I was waiting for. A week later, the district attorney files misdemeanor counts for assault and harassment based on the evidence Detective Rivera collected and the statements that matched mine. There is a date on the calendar for an arraignment, and then a second one for a plea conference. Each time I sit on a bench that faces a door, and I hold my hands together so I can keep them still. Daniel appears only as a name called by a clerk, and as footsteps I hear behind me when the gallery empties. His attorney speaks for him. When the offer comes, it includes probation, counseling, community service, and a long-term order of protection. I let the prosecutor handle the words, while I keep my eyes on a point over the far table. The judge accepts the plea and reads the conditions without drama. The gavel lands soft and final. I walk out into daylight with the odd sense that gravity has changed. Back at the hotel, I find an email from HR with 2 sentences I read 3 times. The investigation is closed. The firm has terminated employment for cause and has entered a report with the relevant licensing body. Attached is a short note that confirms corrective action on the Slack incidents, including formal censure for Evan, and a transfer that removes him from leadership tracks for the next review cycle. Later, he sends a written apology addressed to me by name. He admits to spreading a rumor and demeaning me with language that treated me like a joke. He does not ask for forgiveness or for a reply. I drop the letter in the file and feel a small knot loosen in a place I thought was permanent. At home, I call a locksmith and watch him swap out the deadbolts like a magic trick that requires patience instead of skill. I install a smart camera with Tasha reading the instructions on the floor and handing me screws one at a time. We test the alert on my phone and laugh when it pings, because the living room finally feels like it belongs to me. I update my safety plan and mail a copy to myself, so the date prints beside the postmark. I schedule a standing session with a therapist I met through the victim services list. I buy a plant that needs light and water and a little attention, and place it by the window where my desk looks out over the street. Irene calls and asks if she can drop something by without coming in. I say yes and meet her in the lobby. She hands me a small envelope with a single key inside and says she is returning what she should never have kept. She tells me she is sorry for dressing control as care and that she is learning how to ask before she acts. Her eyes are tired, and she holds the strap of her purse like it might slip. I thank her for the apology without decorating it. Tom sends a letter the next day that says he has reached out to a men's group at his community center to talk about the difference between guidance and control. He says he will start with himself. Natalie and I keep a gentle cadence. She volunteers at the shelter on Saturdays and sends me photos of the donation closet when they need coats or tote bags. Sometimes we meet for tea. We do not talk about Daniel unless there is a reason. Family holidays pass without invitations or explanations, and I feel no need to edit that for other people. The group chat falls quiet in my files and stays loud in their home. I am no longer listening for it. On a quiet evening, I sit with Grandma Eliza's soup bowl clean and dry on the rack, and the new keys warm in my pocket. I look around the room that holds only the things I chose, and I try to find a leftover echo of the life I left. It is not here. The camera light winks once like a small lighthouse. I send Tasha a picture of the plant so she can tell me if it looks happy. She replies that it looks like it finally has a room where it can grow. I put the protective order in the fireproof box with my passport. I slide the locksmith's card into my wallet. I stand at the window and watch the street carry people who are heading somewhere specific. I feel the ground stand still under my feet, and I let that be the ending of this chapter and the beginning of the one where aftercare is not an afterthought but the main plot. I lock the door with a key that clicks clean, and it sounds like a promise I am keeping to myself. 6 months later, the community room at the neighborhood center fills with the gentle noise of people settling in. I unlock the supply cabinet and set out a circle of chairs that do not squeak when someone shifts. On the whiteboard, I write the title of the group, with a simple hand that does not need to perform. Boundary Practice for Everyday Life. The first time I wrote those words, my hand shook. Now the marker moves like it knows the path. The shelter asked me to pilot the group for 8 weeks, and the sign-ups filled in 2 days. The funding comes from a donor-advised grant that the Carters created after their own private reckoning. I accepted the partnership because the money folds into rent vouchers and counseling, and because the paperwork lists my conditions clearly. No names on flyers, no photos of participants, no exceptions. People filter in with mugs and water bottles. A woman in a yellow sweater sits near the door. A man with kind eyes takes a chair by the window. A student sets a notebook on her lap and taps the pen to find a rhythm. I open with breath work to slow the room, and a reminder that stories belong to the people who lived them. Then we begin the practice that changed my life, and costs nothing but attention. One person names a small boundary, and the group helps script the words to hold it. No metaphors, no speeches. A teacher practices saying, "I will answer that email in the morning." A neighbor tries out, "I am not available for surprise visits." The student says, "I am leaving this conversation now, and will return later if it helps." We laugh when the sentences sound wooden, and we keep going until they sound like real voices. At the end, I hand out a card that lists what to do if your body argues with your plan. Drink water, write it down, rehearse again. Natalie comes on Saturdays to help in the donation closet and leaves before group starts because we agreed the work should be mine to run. She texts when the shelves get bare, and I watch the bin fill with coats within hours. Sometimes she sends a photo of her hands sorting scarves with a caption that reads, "Folding is meditation." We meet for tea in the afternoons and trade book titles like recipes. She tells me she is learning to interrupt her family when habits dress as values. She tells me she keeps an envelope on her desk labeled "Ask First" and that it is changing small things at home. Elaine calls one evening from her apartment 3 time zones away and holds the phone near the window so I can hear a storm. She has been accepted to a graduate program that studies how institutions rebuild after harm. She says she wants to build systems that work without requiring a perfect victim. She says she still loses her keys and her temper sometimes, and that it is possible to be a work in progress and a person who helps. I write her words on a sticky note above my desk and send her a photo so she will know they are not going anywhere. A letter arrives from Tom on thick paper that smells like the inside of a library. He writes that he spoke at the community center about the difference between advice and control, and that 3 men stayed after to ask how to apologize to daughters without handing them a speech. He writes that he is practicing saying "I was wrong" and waiting for the answer without filling the silence. He says it is the hardest and most honest thing he has done in years. I fold the letter and put it next to the locksmith's card, because both feel like tools. Irene sends an invitation to a fundraiser she is helping to plan for the shelter. The card is tasteful and does not use anyone's story as decoration. I decide to attend because I can leave at any time, and because boundaries also include the ones you draw with yourself about forgiveness. At the event, she keeps a respectful distance and handles logistics with the efficiency of someone who can make a room run. She slips out before the speeches and leaves behind a stack of neatly labeled boxes for the donation closet. I thank her by email the next day, and she replies with a single sentence. "I am learning to ask, and I am listening when the answer is no." On a quiet morning, I sit at my desk with a mug of tea and a talk to finish. The title sits at the top of the page in a font that looks like handwriting. How to notice yourself again. I think about the outlines I built when my hands were unsteady, and about the people who held out railings until I could walk by myself. I add a section about documentation as care. I add a section about small scripts that make big choices possible. I add a final reminder that a boundary is not a wall, but a door you choose when to open. When the draft reads like someone could take it home and use it, I save the file and print a copy and slide it into my bag. That evening, I walk to the community hall where the chairs are already set in even rows. The microphone catches my breath for a second and then releases it. I look out at a room that holds people I love and strangers who chose to show up. I begin with a story about a bowl for keys, and the day I learned a simple sentence that rebuilt a life. I say that healing is not a performance. It is a series of small choices repeated until they live in your body. The room gets quiet in the way that means people can hear themselves. I close with a promise that does not need applause. We are not fragile. We are paying attention. The lights feel warm on my face and my voice does not shake. I am who I say I am. I step away from the podium and the evening opens like a door I locked and then learned to unlock on my own.